Both of our scriptures this morning are from the Gospels. The first one is from the Gospel of Luke in chapter 4, beginning at verse 16. Hear now God's word to each of us. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And then when we turn to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, we're going to read verses 13 through 16. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but it is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. One of the things that made Jesus such a good teacher is that he used everyday, common examples to teach lessons about what it means to be his follower. You know, vine and branches, weeds and wheat, the sower and the seeds, the birds that are fed, the lilies of the field that are clothed, and on and on. And he does the same again in this passage, where he uses the common elements of salt and light to teach a valuable lesson to his followers and to teach a valuable lesson to us. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. In Jesus' day, salt was more expensive than gold. It was essential to every civilization in that day because it was used to preserve food. No meat, no fish, nothing else could really be consumed in over a day if it hadn't first been soaked in salt to preserve it. Salt was the preservative of Jesus' day. I mean, there weren't exactly freezers or refrigeration. And so salt is what was used to keep a civilization going. One resource said that salt's preservative powers made it an absolute necessity of life and a virtual synonym for essential life-giving forces. Salt was an essential life-giving force. Without it, you could hardly survive. That was the importance of salt in that day. It was a precious commodity. It was often mined around the Dead Sea, where even today salt formations can be found. And yet, without a lot of technology, there wasn't a whole lot of purification with salt. And so often the salts that they had in those days was not the kind of table salt that we would imagine. It was filled with impurities. There was dirt and other chemicals and with it, and you try to wash it, but when you wash salt, it kind of starts to dissolve a little bit. So it was kind of hard to get out all the impurities of the salt. In fact, there was some salt that all you could do with it was put it in this mesh bag and soak it in water so that the impurities stayed in the bag, but the salt would diffuse, of course, into the water or the stew or whatever it is that somebody was cooking at the time. But then you were left with this bag of impurities, dirt and chemicals and anything else that was in there. Those impurities you couldn't just throw in the field. Nothing would grow. It was filled with things that killed the soil. So instead, they threw it on the dirt path where anybody could trample on it. Donkeys, people, the wheels and the carts of the day. And that's where we get this, what Jesus is trying to tell us with, if salt loses its saltiness, it's got to be trampled on because it's not good for anything else. In fact, it will be harmful to the field that you happen to throw it in. Well, scientists will tell you that sodium chloride is the most stable compound there is, and therefore salt never technically loses its saltiness. Okay, but we don't have a science lesson here. We have a spiritual lesson. So what is the lesson Jesus is trying to tell us? Teach us today. First of all, you are the salt of the earth. You are a precious commodity. You are more important than gold. You are worth something. You are valuable. That's what people would have heard when they were taught you are the salt of the earth. You see, even in a world like today, people get these messages, right? That you're not worth anything unless you produce something or make something or create something or sell something. And Jesus says you, in and of yourself, because of who you are valuable and precious and expensive. Because you are the salt of the earth. That's how I created you. You are what do we say? The essential life-giving force. You are precious. The second thing he may have been trying to teach us in this you are salt example is that salt has a purpose, right? The purpose is to preserve or to flavor. We have a purpose also, a mission, if you will. That is part of who we are. And it's a life-giving force in this world. We're to go out as we share God's love to preserve the goodness that exists in this world, to flavor this world with God's love and hope and peace and goodness. And Jesus says if you lose your saltiness, if you lose that purpose, that calling, that mission, if you lose that inherent worth, well, what good are you? If we forget the reason why we were created, to go out and to flavor the world with God's love, then we're not really being the followers of Christ that he asks us to be. And yeah, we're going to have some of those impurities in us, right? But that's okay. It's okay because that salt tells us to go out, interact with the food and the meat and the world, and make it a little bit better, a little more palatable, a little more flavorful. And the final thing that salt reminds us of is that it isn't good for anything unless you pour it out. I mean, if salt stays in the salt shaker, if it stays in the pantry, it could be the best, most expensive salt in the whole world, but if it's never used, what good is it? It's not fulfilling its purpose. And so, us salt right here, we can stay with our salty friends in this beautiful salt shaker that we're in and just stay here because it's a great, safe, wonderful place to be. But if we don't get poured out into the world, if we don't go out and mix and mingle and share that love, that saltiness that we have experienced here, then we're not fulfilling that mission, that purpose that we were created for. So we've got to get out. We've got to get out and share. You are the salt of the earth. You are precious. You are important. You are valuable to God. And you have a purpose, a mission to preserve the goodness in this world, to flavor the world with God's love and hope and peace and joy. And you are sent to go out and be poured out into this world, to share that love with others. But Jesus didn't stop there. He gave us yet another example of what it means to be his followers. And this time, instead of salt, he uses light. And he says, "You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to the whole house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven." All right, now this example is a little easier to grasp for us. Of course, light back then didn't mean electricity or batteries. They were oil lamps. Jesus says, you are like an oil lamp. Oil lamps are lit when it's dark, at night, not during the day. And when they are lit, they're not hid, but they're put in the center of the house. In the center of the darkness is where the light is most effective and fulfills its purpose. And Jesus says, you are the light of the world. You are like that oil lamp. Jesus himself is shining through us and in us. And as Christians, we don't just stay in the light, in the nice, comfortable places of this world. We are called, if we are to be most effective, we are called to go out into the darkness, into the places that most need to hear about Jesus. That's our mission. Go to the dark places, the places of hunger and hopelessness. Go to the dark places, the places of pain and loneliness. Go to the dark places of illness. Go to the dark places of addiction. Go to the dark places in this world where people need to hear and see the light. There's a lot of dark places in this world. And we are asked to go out into them and to be the light of Christ in this world. It can make a huge difference to those people walking in darkness. Because at night, when you get up at 2 or 3 in the morning, if you don't have a nightlight, you're stumbling into things, right? That the clothes you left on the floor the night before, right? You're tripping over them, or that your spouse may have left on the floor at night. But if there's a little bit of light, just a little night light, just a little, the moon shining through the window, anything helps you to see so much better. Folks, we don't have to be a huge bonfire burning bright. We can be this little candle that goes out and sheds light in the darkness. That's our mission, our purpose in this world, and it is most effective when we're right in the center of that darkness. Today is the end of our 7-week sermon series about mission. And in these weeks together, we have reflected on what it means to be God's ambassadors in this world, what it means to be missionaries in our neighborhoods and communities, what God's mission is that the world might be saved through Jesus Christ, and how we can partner with that, and how we put on these God lenses when we look at people so we can see them with compassion, that even though our hearts are breaking, that we are sent out to go and to help and to share what we can. So we're sent out to do something like salt and light with a purpose, to share that love, that mission, to interact with other people and to build relationships. And in time, through words, through our actions, to let people know there is more than just what you see in this world. For our offertory song and for our closing song today, I want you to listen to the lyrics, because it's what we are commissioned to do as Christians. Carry your candle. Run to the darkness. Seek out the hopeless, the confused, the torn. Hold out your candle for the world to see. Take your candle and go light your world. That's what mission is all about. That's what it means to be sent out to the harassed and helpless of this world as God's ambassadors, taking your candle and going to ignite the world on fire with the love of God. And every action you take, every word you speak, every person you encounter is a little more salt and a little more light in this world. Imagine if every one of us did that this week. The collection of salt and light that would affect the people around us. Mission work isn't about a committee. Mission work isn't about a program or a technique or a tract that we can hand to somebody. Mission is about intentionally living our lives every day, seeking a way to share God's love in some way with someone else. And whether it's, asking your waitress when you go out to eat if she has a prayer concern as you say grace that you can include. Or whether it's getting to know the name and the story of the person that signs you in at the doctor's office every time you go, which seems like every week, right? Sometimes. Whatever it is, what is an intentional way that you can be salt and light, God's missionary in this world? Because, my friends, take your candle. Don't walk, but run straight to the darkness. And go set the world on fire with God's love. Hallelujah. Amen.